Our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clarke, joins us. And Michael, we start this hour with a big map of Ukraine, and it is notable that Ukraine's back on the map of geopolitics, isn't it? We've been talking so much about Greenland. We've been talking so much about Iran. We've been talking so much about, Venezuela and the leader there. We've been talking about Cuba. It feels as though this hasn't been the focus of attention for the world leaders for a bit, but under the presidency of France at the G7, they've put Ukraine square and centre at the front of the mindset of the media and also the president.
Yeah, and good for President Macron for doing that, because as chair of the G7 for this meeting, there he is. He said, we've got to talk about this. And what's happening in Ukraine is that things that the Ukrainians put in hand last autumn, which they kept quiet about, have begun to work their way through and have changed some of the perception of how Ukraine is doing in the war. So by use of their new drone technologies, so they've got their 5.2, we've got 5.1, 2, 5 and 7, which they're developing, which are terrific systems, very cheap compared to anything else. And their 5.2 drone is very effective at attacking logistics behind the line, anything from 20 to 200 kilometres. They've also got a Hornet drone, which was made of polystyrene, carries a small charge, but it's AI directed, and it can attack moving targets extremely effectively. And then they've got a new drone, which they've only just unveiled, and they're keeping the specifications of that to themselves. But what they're doing is attacking Russian logistics that are going towards the front. So if you look at Pokrovsk there on the map, and that's been the main focus of Russia's attempts at a spring offensive. And the Ukrainians have basically been starving them of equipment going to Pokrovsk. And even more than that, look at that from between Rostov-on-Don inside Russia right through to Zelenskyy in Crimea, because there's only two ways into Crimea in the north there. There's two little land bridges there to mainland Ukraine, and then there's the Kerch Strait where it sort of abuts Russia itself. But the main road from Rostov-on-Don to Zelenskyy is the R280, and it runs all the way along the coast, runs through Mariupol and also Melitopol, Berdyansk. And the Ukrainians have been really targeting that road, and they've made that road into a sort of thunder run for Russian supply convoys, and they've made it untenable. And that puts Crimea under real pressure, because one of the things the Ukrainians have been trying to do to the Russians is to make Crimea unviable as a place to live for all the Russians who've moved in since 2014 when the Russians seized it, and also make it unworkable as a military base. Because it's a big military base, it feeds all of the military supplies up into southern Ukraine. Sevastopol was the home of the Black Sea Fleet. And the Ukrainians have never been able to really put Crimea under pressure. In 2023, the big offensive they tried in the summer of 2023, all with their Western equipment, they tried to move south from Orikhiv right into, and to go down what I call Route 1, to get close enough to Crimea to put it under pressure with artillery. They didn't make it. But now, with their new drones and their long-distance drones, they're able, and some of the ballistic missiles they're developing, they're able now to put Crimea under real pressure. So that's a strategic gain for them. Plus, their drones, and again, it's their homemade drones, are attacking Russia itself, and they're creating real shortages of refined oil and petrol inside Russia. It's not going to bring the Russian economy down, but it certainly increases the staggering of the Russian economy this year. So they've done themselves some good. As I keep saying, none of this is going to win them the war, but they've turned the narrative round that they are the ultimate losers. The Russian position has always been, particularly in talking to the Americans, they say, look, we will win this war. The longer the Ukrainians hold on, the worse it will be for them. Get them to give in now, and fewer people will die. And that was an argument which President Trump repeated again and again. And the argument now is, and what the G7 leaders are trying to say to the Americans, I think, is the situation is different on the ground now. You said that President Zelenskyy had no cards to play in that famous meeting that we were talking about before on the 20th of February last year, wasn't it? February 2025, that's right, yeah. And he said, you've got no cards in your hand. Well, the fact is, Mr. President, they've got quite a few cards in their hand, and it's the Russians who are looking as if they haven't got too many cards at the moment. So it's time to rethink the strategy. That's what the message is at the G7 to the United States delegation. Whether they'll take the message or not, we don't really know.
And it's worth noting, isn't it, that the Russians having to use this highway to try and supply Crimea, there is a bridge, the Crimean Bridge, that links the Russian peninsula to Crimea. It was opened with much fanfare by President Putin. It's
2016, yeah.
10 miles long. It has both road and rail links through it, but the Ukrainians have been successful in targeting that bridge. Now, they've not broken that bridge and destroyed it, but they have blown up vehicles that are driving across it. And the risk for the Russians of driving trains across it full of fuel that are then targeted by drones is so great that the bridge is kind of slightly redundant at the moment. It's barely being
Well,
used.
it's overloaded, that's for sure. It's the Kerch Strait, the Kerch Bridge. And so it's, you see where the Zankoy, where the Zankoy is, well, underneath the K, that's on the map. That's where the Kerch Bridge is. And it's overloaded. It can't carry the sort of the tonnage of material that the Russians need to send into Crimea or towards that part of the battlefront. And the Ukrainians have targeted it twice successfully. Every time they target it, the Russians increase their defence of the bridge, so they've got huge defences around the Kerch Bridge. If the Ukrainians could target it again, they would. I mean, for sure, they would if they could. But they've damaged it twice, they've reduced its capacity twice, they've made it feel unsafe. And I'm sure they'll continue to try to do that. But if they can stop the R280 highway, the Novorossiya highway, as the Russians call it, if they can make that unviable, then the Kerch Bridge will not solve Russia's problems. It can't take the volume. And if the Ukrainians find a way of attacking the Kerch Bridge as well, I bet if they could, they really would in the next month, then Russia really would have a problem in Crimea.
Michael, plenty more to come. Thank you so much.